This story could be started with a lengthy introduction, but first of all, I don't like drawn-out prologues. And secondly, there is so much interesting content that it's better to get straight to the point. Look at this image. What do you notice? Three twins who closely resemble each other, smiling, curly-haired young men in identical striped outfits. Everything in this description is accurate except for one fact. These young men are not brothers. At the time the photo was taken, they were simply three nearly indistinguishable strangers living in different families and cities with no knowledge of each other. In short, here's how it all happened. In the early 1980s in America, a 19-year-old student accidentally meets his identical twin, a brother whose existence no one was aware of. This incredible story captures attention and makes its way into the newspapers. Later, a summer student from another city notices the article and realizes that he bears a striking resemblance to these guys. Thus, it turns out that we have three twins, not two. For nearly 20 years since their birth, neither they nor their parents had any idea about the existence of the brothers. Absolutely no information. And at this moment, the captivating story is just beginning to unfold. Soon, the brothers confront a horrifying truth about their past that changes everything. But the unexpected events do not end there, as ultimately, the story of the three strangers will intertwine with narratives that relate to each of us. Imagine that you accidentally encounter your double on the street. It's a strange, frightening, and extremely unusual feeling to see someone who looks just like you, yet is completely different. This motif is widely used in literature and film. Do you know why that is? A double represents a doorway to a parallel reality. From time to time, each of us wonders, what if? What if I had been born in a different place, attended another school, enrolled in a different university, or chosen a different career? What if I had different acquaintances or friends? What if my life were completely different? The year 1980 was eventful for the USSR. The Olympics took place, a volcano erupted in the United States, John Lennon was killed, and Zimbabwe achieved independence. However, for 19-year-old student Bobby Shafran, these events held little significance. It was his first year in college. He was attending the not-so-prestigious Sullivan County Community College, located in a small town near New York. On the day Bobby arrived at the dormitory, strange things began happening to him. Unknown students greeted him and asked how he had spent his time, which could have been attributed to politeness, if it weren't for the fact that every other person called him Eddie. The revelation came from a classmate who had studied with the mysterious stranger. A few hours later, Bobby Shafran stood at Eddie Gallen's door. He looked into the same eyes, saw the same hair and academic gestures. It created a complete impression that he was gazing at his own reflection. These two individuals who had never known about each other were strikingly similar. It soon became known that Bobby and the twins were born on the same day in 1961. The boys were adopted in infancy and placed in different families, with their parents always acknowledging that they were adopted. However, no one even suspected that they had a twin brother. This information was not disclosed by the adoption agency. Naturally, the story garnered widespread attention in the press, first in local newspapers and then in major publications. the miraculous reunion of the twins after 20 years. Who wouldn't want to cover that? At this moment, the story shifts from astonishing to incredible. The New York Post, a well-known tabloid that one sometimes feels embarrassed to admit reading, yet remains popular. It was in this newspaper that friends of 19-year-old David Kellman stumbled upon the tale of the miraculous reunion of two twin brothers after 20 years. However, their attention was primarily drawn to the photograph of the main characters. In the picture, they saw two individuals who were exact replicas of their friend David. Moreover, the date and year of birth of these brothers matched his. It is to this newspaper that they turn. What happened, and who are these people? It turned out that the originally separated twins were not two, but three, and all of them, along with their parents, had never known about each other. Moreover, the strangers not only looked alike, their eye and hair color, facial features matched, but even their gestures, expressions, and gait were identical. After a brief conversation, they uncovered yet another astonishing detail. Many of their interests and preferences coincided. How is this possible? Before us are twin brothers. This explains their physical resemblance. But how can we account for the rest? The boys were separated when they were very small. How could it be that these individuals were so alike, not only in their expressions and movements, but even in their life choices? This question becomes particularly relevant considering that the adoptive families of the twins are radically different. Eddie's adoptive father was an experienced doctor, while his mother was a lawyer. Both parents had a good education and a high income, but they were often busy with work, which affected their son's upbringing. His biological parents represented a completely different class. His father worked as a college professor and was known for being demanding, especially regarding discipline in his home. David's family was simple. His parents, first-generation immigrants for whom English was not their native language, owned a small shop. Unlike the others, David's father was characterized by openness, warmth, and optimism. When all three twins met for the first time in the yard, it seemed that the 20 years of separate lives had left no mark at all. The brothers resembled each other so closely that it felt as if they had always grown up together. It was astonishing and even surreal. It quickly became clear that such an unusual story could end either happily or sadly. Since this is real life, one can make predictions. At first, it seems like a fairy tale. Three twins enchantingly reunite after 20 years of separation. This case goes beyond ordinary news. It is material for major television networks. The brothers became invited guests on the most popular television shows in the country, which provided them with a massive audience. Soon, the twins gained fame throughout America. The brothers sat as if they were copies of each other. The same posture, the same way of holding the microphones, similar smiles. During the interview, it became clear that even without knowing about each other's existence, they smoked the same cigarettes, listened to the same music, were passionate about the same cars, and preferred older women. How did it happen that they were separated, and why are they so similar? Although the twins had never known each other, they were not initially troubled by these questions. They simply enjoyed their unexpected fame. What can be expected from 19-year-old guys who have instantly gained nationwide fame? They rented an apartment for 3 in New York and spent their time at parties, between interviews and talk shows. The 3 even managed to appear in a scene of a movie with Madonna. When Wade developed appendicitis, it turned out that he did not have health insurance. Without insurance, such an operation in the U.S. could cost $1,000. The solution was simple and resourceful. Eddie had the surgery covered by his brother's insurance, and no one at the hospital noticed the switch. Overall, the brothers were living life to the fullest. The only ones feeling concern about the situation were the twins' parents, who were searching for answers to their questions. Why were the brothers separated, and why was there no mention of the other twins during the adoption? To resolve these questions, they turned to the Louis Weiss Agency, a prestigious organization for Jewish families through which all 3 were adopted in 1961. It was revealed that the twins had been separated at 6 months old, and the agency explained that separating the children made it easier to find adoptive parents, as there were few willing to adopt all 3 at that time. The adoptive parents began to claim that their sons, when they first arrived, would bang their heads against the bars of the crib and would not stop crying. Could this have been related to a sense of loss? It seemed to make sense, considering what would later be revealed. In the early 80s, the families decided to sue the adoption agency, but lawyers refused to take the case, likely due to the low chances of success in court. There was nothing illegal about the actions taken regarding the separate adoptions. Nevertheless, the parents were convinced that Louis Weiss and Agency had influential backers who were blocking the progress of the case. At first glance, such a conspiracy theory, born in the minds of the parents, could be seen as merely a result of helplessness and a lack of information. For a long time, it will seem that nothing remarkable is happening until 15 years later, in the 1990s, a horrifying truth is revealed that is hard to believe. Our story will shift from incredible to absurd when the twins learn that they have become part of a secret experiment. In the first half of the 1990s, a journalist from The New Yorker began preparing a major article about the separated twins as part of his research. During his research, he uncovered data about a secret experiment in which the twins were separated almost immediately after birth and sent to different families. All adoptions were carried out through the same agency from New York, the Louis Weiss Agency. The journalist reached out to the twins to share his discovery. They began to recall how, during their childhood and teenage years, strangers would frequently come to visit them. These individuals conducted various tests, asked questions, and assessed their coordination, intelligence, and other personality traits, all of which were recorded on camera. The parents were told this was a standard procedure. According to the adoption agency staff, the living conditions and development of the children were being evaluated. No one mentioned that 100 kilometers away in other cities, there were 2 more twin brothers, and that all of this was actually part of a large experiment. It was reminiscent of a television show where the main character finds himself in unexpected, comical, and often absurd situations, only to discover in the end that. Thus, the story of the 3 twins from New York increasingly resembled the plot of a television show, but in a more distorted reality. In the end, no one showed up with flowers to congratulate the participants on the conclusion of the event. None of the brothers knew when the research began and ended, nor what its purpose and results were. The only clear realization for the twins in the mid-90s was that they had spent most of their lives as subjects in an experiment. This caused extremely unpleasant feelings. During his investigation, the journalist from the New Yorker discovered several more unwitting participants in the experiment, all of whom shared the fact that they were identical or monozygotic twins. The research began actively in the early 60s when the twins were placed for adoption into different families. The project was led by Peter Neubauer, a renowned psychiatrist considered one of the leading specialists in the country at that time. Neubauer, a Jewish immigrant from Austria, survived the Holocaust, which added an element of surreal black irony to the experiment with twins. Nevertheless, the primary goal of the research was to answer one of the most important questions. What shapes us, nature or nurture? Do genes or environment determine who we become? This means that if such children are placed in different families during early childhood and observed throughout their lives, the differences in intelligence, education, personality traits, and life successes will indicate the influence of family, upbringing, and environment on a person with a given set of genes. Can we change our lives, or does genetics determine our possibilities and limitations? Why has each of us become exactly who we are? Agree, this makes you think. This is not just a personal growth course where you are told that you are capable of anything. It is serious science that raises moral dilemmas. Why is that? The results of such research can have a significant impact on the life of each individual. For the experiment to be conducted with maximum accuracy, it is essential to carefully select families for the adoption of the twins. We have already mentioned that the parents of our subjects belong to different social strata, but it is also critically important that their personal qualities and parenting styles varied. This can only be understood under one condition: if the parents already have one child. It was precisely such families that the authors of the study were looking for. As a result, each of our subjects had an older sister who was 2 years their senior. Thus, the participants in Vohr's experiment included not only the twins, but also their parents. The brothers were also interested in the results of the research in the mid-90s for one reason. A few years after their reunion, they found their biological mother. Even before the advent of Google and DNA tests, this was not a complicated task. Their biological mother was likely also from the city, as it is rare for 3 identical twins to be born on a single day in a large metropolis. It was only necessary to find out where to locate the records of maternity hospitals, and that place turned out to be the New York Public Library. The brothers met with their biological mother and learned the story of their birth, which turned out to be quite ordinary. An unplanned pregnancy after a graduation party led to the decision to put the children up for adoption. Their communication with their biological mother ended after a single meeting in the 80s. They already had parents, and they felt that they did not share a common fate with this random woman from their past. Nevertheless, the data from the Neubauer experiment added a special interest to the situations involving the biological mother. When the twins reunited after 20 years, they hardly noticed any physical or mental differences. despite the fact that the families in which they had grown up were completely different. Does this mean that genes determine everything, while our notions of upbringing, free will, choice, and self-improvement are merely fleeting fluctuations in infinity? Why were the results of the Neubauer experiment not published and kept secret until 20XX? What events transpired? Perhaps now we are entering the most fascinating part of the video. It's time to discuss the results of the experiment, as this concerns each of us. Should we make efforts, strive, and work on ourselves, or are we under the yoke of our genes, with our lives predetermined from the very beginning? Spoiler, the results may be disheartening, but let's break everything down step by step. Although the Neubauer studies are still classified, we can vaguely imagine their results. Firstly, in addition to the three brothers, there is information about several other participants in the study. Secondly, other experiments were conducted as well. Secondly, other experiments were conducted with identical twins that were more ethical compared to the Neubauer studies, but their results were less precise. Researchers examined already existing families with separated twins for various reasons and conducted tests. This limited the ability to control for parental choice and social status, and the observations did not always begin from infancy. However, due to the existence of a number of similar studies, it is possible to compare their results and derive an overall average. It is important to emphasize that all the studies discussed pertain to identical or monozygotic twins, meaning individuals with absolutely identical genomes. This is an extremely rare phenomenon, akin to a divine lottery, occurring in only 3 cases out of 1,000 births. Therefore, the results of such studies hold high value and are of great interest. Let's consider another example from the Neubauer experiment. This time, it involves 2 twin girls, Amy and Bez, who were separated in infancy and were observed for nearly 2 decades by their adoptive mother. Amy's adoptive mother was not a model of parenting. She was insecure and did not always understand or empathize. In their family, traditions, discipline, and academic achievements were valued. In contrast, Bez's mother was energetic and positive, always ready to support her daughter in everything. The girl in this family did not face criticism for her failures and received a lot of attention. What result should we ultimately expect? Perhaps the completely opposite one. Considering such different families, both in terms of their structure and, most importantly, their parenting approaches, one might hope for differences. However, this is not the case. Amy's mental health issues began to manifest quite early. She suffered from bitten nails, constant tears, nightmares, various fears, academic difficulties, as well as imaginary illnesses and imaginary friends. This seems logical, given her family circumstances. What did the researchers observe regarding Bez's biological sister? Surprisingly, the results were almost identical. Although there were some minor differences overall, the behaviors were the same. So, what do we ultimately have? In the past, I could blame all my psychological problems on my parents and upbringing, but now I can no longer do that? Does this mean that all the money spent on therapy has gone to waste? Bad news! This is not where the matter ends. Research and experiments involving people tread the line between morality and science. When it comes to selective experiments, this crosses the boundaries of what is acceptable. Throughout history, there have been instances where such attempts were made and the outcome was nothing but negative. However, we have examples with rats. Scientists conducted numerous experiments on them, some of which involved selection. The essence of the study was that rats that successfully navigated mazes were placed in one cage with similarly intelligent individuals, while the less successful ones were placed in another. Over several generations, the rodents in one group became increasingly smarter, while those in the other group became less intelligent. Do you hear that sound? Something in the distance is breaking with a crash. Yes, this is our perception of the world. But all right, let's not panic and divert our attention to the questionable Neubauer experiment. After all, rats are not humans. Let's consider other studies on twins. Fortunately, since the 1980s, numerous such studies have been conducted in various countries, including the United States, Australia, and Sweden. We hope that the results of this research will help us understand free will, self-development, and limitless possibilities. Yes, you can become whoever you want, regardless of your roots. Just work hard and dream. It seems that dreams remain our only solace. Many studies show similar results. People with identical genes, raised in different families, social classes, cities, and countries, end up becoming practically the same. I am not just talking about appearance, gestures, and facial expressions. This concerns psychological issues, interests, values, and even biographical data. Consider that according to research, note that studies show that people who are completely unfamiliar with each other but share the same set of genes align on parameters such as smoking, insomnia, age at marriage and divorce, choice of profession and hobbies, as well as suicidal tendencies, coffee consumption levels, and political preferences. We are on the brink of discussing dreams, ambitions, and possibilities. What sets us apart? Genes? But really, how is that possible? Physical characteristics are becoming clearer. Let's take an obvious example: height. If a child has tall parents, there is a high likelihood that they will grow up to be tall as well, except in cases of extraordinary circumstances, such as famine. But what can we do? Genes can transmit liberal values or interests, such as skiing. How can we move forward if our genes have already decided everything for us? The story of the three twins is actually quite complex, perhaps even too complex. Is it possible to find hope at this depth that family, upbringing, and self-improvement truly matter? To answer this question, let us return to the story we began with today, about the three twins who were born in the 1960s. The facts from their biography can reveal a lot. In the early 80s, when all the brothers were giving numerous interviews and participating in television shows, their striking resemblance was astonishing. Although the twins somewhat played to the audience, this did not diminish their true similarity, which received little attention at the time. However, an important difference among them became their wives. While all the twins married around the same time in the 80s, their spouses were completely different. Several years ago, the wives of Bobby, David, and Eddie looked completely different. To claim that they do not resemble each other is to say nothing at all. Moreover, the women themselves noted that they could clearly distinguish each of the brothers and considered their husband the most attractive. At the height of their popularity, the twins decided to open a restaurant. The restaurant was called Triplex. The triplets quickly gained popularity among tourists. However, running a shared business requires hard work, and conflicts are inevitable. They arise when different opinions, worldviews, and personalities clash. This is exactly what happened with the twins, who at first glance seemed almost identical. The first of the brothers to leave the business was David. This was a case where years of growing up together could have helped resolve the situation. You learn to understand the perspectives of a close person, find compromises, and interact. However, the brothers did not have that experience. This difference continued thereafter. In 2018, a documentary was released about the fate of the brothers, but it only focused on two of them. It became known that Eddie had taken his own life back in the 1990s. After this tragedy, family members began to recall his strong qualities. Thus, the research confirms that similar difficulties must arise for all twins, especially considering that during their only meeting with their mother, they noticed her strange behavior. Why did the tragedy only affect one of the brothers? This raises hope that genes do not determine everything. All the brothers, including Eddie, had a creative, free-spirited, and artistic nature, which made them natural participants in numerous shows and interviews. However, in Eddie's family, this quality was not valued. His father, a college instructor, adhered to strict principles of discipline. Acknowledging this, Eddie noted that for most of his life, he felt like an outsider. It is unclear whether this is the main reason for one of the brothers' suicides, but this theory aligns with the results of studies that we have not yet examined. This quality was not valued in Eddie's family. They discussed the differences observed in individuals with complete genetic matching. For example, identical twins sometimes exhibited differences even at the biological level. Some of them were more similar than others. Some experienced serious hereditary diseases, while others did not. One could be right-handed, while the other was left-handed. Hair could curl in different directions, and so on. In one study, involving 500 pairs of identical twins diagnosed with skin cancer, the disease was found in both twins in only 10 cases. Moreover, if one twin had fair skin, the same trait was observed in his brother, which significantly increases the risk of developing melanoma. This suggests that even at a biological level, the influence of the environment and personal actions matters. Additionally, some studies on identical twins have noted the impact of upbringing on a child's future. However, to be fair, it turned out to be not as significant as it may seem. For example, it is interesting to note that there is virtually no difference in the influence of overly protective parents compared to that of regular parents on a child's future. Nevertheless, let's focus on the positive. Upbringing does have a certain impact, and for that, we should be grateful. Finally, the last argument can be found in the examples of our subjects. Look at how they appeared just a few years ago. By the age of 60, their appearances had changed significantly. While it can still be argued that they are brothers, they can no longer be called identical twins. Furthermore, one of them is no longer alive. While preparing the video, the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came to mind, which takes place in a closed psychiatric hospital. Imagine that we are all its patients, and the building symbolizes our genes. In the film, some characters strive to break free. In one famous scene, the main character tries to lift a heavy shower stall off the floor, but he is unable to do so. A closed psychiatric hospital. He is unable to accomplish the task, and at the end of the scene, he utters the famous line, "But at least I tried." The film concludes with another character successfully tearing down the structure, breaking the window, and gaining freedom. Yes, our lives are largely determined by our genes, probably even more than we would like to believe. But that does not negate the desire to make attempts.